Hi, everyone. Howie here. We're in the third week of February 2025. I wanted to do our weekly flyover where we take a kind of a broad view of what's going on in the world after getting really in the nitty gritty of the details and articles and news facts and trends and lots of times on X and posting videos and shorts. I think it's important to do what I'm doing right now, which is I like to think of the eagle. Eagle flies really high and then kind of surveys the lake and then just dives down and grabs the fish when it sees it. Or the other analogy that I love is the old Italian grandmother that we all love, cooking the sauce. There's a lot of time putting the ingredients in, and then there's a long simmer, and then you taste the sauce. You savor it like savoring the wine after it's come out of the barrel all those years. So it's that the idea that our study, our paying attention, our reading the details, that's cutting up the ingredients. The simmering is our time that we spend in quiet or on the couch or looking at the tree or in prayer and or asleep. And then the tasting is now. Tasting is when we step back with no notes and we look and we say, what is it that stands out? What do we taste in the sauce? And a couple of things I think over the last week or so that are standing out to me. Number one, Pete Hegseth, okay, in Brussels, goes to Europe, Secretary of Defense, brand new Secretary of Defense. And what stands out? Many, many things he did and said. Ukraine is not going to enter NATO. Bingo. That's a taste. That really stands out to me. Second is Vance, and where he could have spoken about many, many things, but the AI in general, and he used the moment to really emphasize free speech. Bingo. Okay? I think those are the two issues, the two takeaways from the last 8-10 days. Trump sending them there. Of course, Rubio, too, goes later to begin the negotiations about ending the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So you have the president here with Musk really focusing on dodge and executive orders. He sends three, Hegseth, Vance, and Rubio. And make no mistake about it, if Donald Trump is nothing else, he is in control. It's really kind of interesting, this narrative that people are pushing that Musk is really in control, because it's the exact opposite. Whenever they push one narrative, it's the opposite. If there's nothing you can say about Trump, he's probably a control freak, okay? But what is really refreshing is that I think he spent so much time thinking about what his cabinet would be like if he had a second chance, and he has, more so than if he was elected in order, right? From if he would have won the election with Biden, he wouldn't have been as prepared as he is now. So he had 4 years to think about this, 4 years to form relationships. And I do think what you see is a leader in Trump who I think is instinctively a controlling man, which is common for that kind of position and that kind of aptitude, but who is listening and is trusting his lieutenants, if you will. And he's letting them go. And I think it's also an age thing. He's really stepping back. And if you put the right people in place, you can let them run ahead. You can give them a lot of freedom. And you can even let them get the credit. Okay? So this idea that they're trying to turn that around, that Musk is really in charge, is just nonsense. Okay, so he sends three of them. And going back to the two main points, Hegseth, Ukraine will not be joining NATO. He would not have said that, okay, if that's not the case. That is the Trump policy, the administration's policy. That is their strategy. That is their belief. They know. That tells you something. That tells you that they know that Putin, that is a red line. Putin is not crossing that line. Putin will not stop if Ukraine is going to enter NATO. Now, we know something about Putin, and I think this is why I like this. I love this analogy of tasting the sauce, because you don't really, and I really like the idea of not having notes and not writing things down. I think you got to just trust that our brains work, and that when you're really paying attention, that what comes in the taste, you got to trust. And that's really the taste here. And if you think about it, And if you go back to Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin. It's a while back now. But there are moments in it where there's something very clear. Okay. And also Putin, so watch, I really advise you, if you haven't watched the whole interview, watch it. It's important. It's not about liking Putin or disliking him or agreeing with him or thinking. No, the bottom line is he is the leader of Russia. And it's important to understand where he's coming from. You might say he's lying. It's really not important, actually. It's important if he's lying. But what's important is what he is saying. He is presenting his case clearly. He's presenting something that he believes is going to benefit Russia. I think the takeaway, again, the taste of that long, long interview was that Russia wants their boundaries, their borders. They don't want NATO on their border. This is, and that's oversimplified, but yes, the end of the day, that is not going to be acceptable. And he also tells Carlson in that when the 6 times, I believe Putin says that 6 times NATO has expanded, and they said they wouldn't. So this idea that Ukraine is the last, no way. So for Hegseth to come out and say that, boom, 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 focus on that. NATO, Ukraine will not be in NATO. That I'll bet the bank on that. The other important thing is, Carlson, whatever you think of him, he provides a great service. And when he puts out, it's like Rogan. When you put somebody, and Sean Ryan did it recently with the candidate who's running for the Romanian president, that the election was canceled and they're going to redo it. You let world leaders speak for a long time. It's really educational. It's really insightful. It doesn't mean you approve them. You need to listen. And when in the history of the world can a commoner get to listen to a world leader for a few hours? To hear them years ago, you'd have to be at their speech in person. Now we have recordings, fine, but not for 2 hours, and not in the way of 2 men sitting in chairs talking. Rogan does that with many people. Rogan did it with Trump, and he did it with Vance. He offered it to Harris, and they didn't work it out. But he does it with a lot of other people. But what Tucker does, this is what I think, what Tucker is really adding value, is that he's done it with Putin. He did it with the Secretary of Defense, I believe the Secretary of Defense of Russia, or the Secretary of State. I forget what this exact title was. He did Viktor Orban of Hungary. He does the pattern. The fact that he lets these people, I don't say let as in permission, but creates an environment where they speak. It's really an exciting time. And Viktor Orban, Prime Minister, of Hungary, when you listen to that interview with Tucker, Orban really makes something very clear. And it's the takeaway, the tasting of the sauce of that interview is that Orban makes clear that we need to understand that Russia, what comes first and foremost is protection. That they're a military nation, they're a military-based nation, and protection of their borders, protection of their society and their culture. That that's what's first and foremost. We don't think that way. America is innovation and expansive and liberty. The Russian people, the Russian nation, is a protective nation, a military nation. And that, he said during this interview with Carlson that he was asked early on who's going to win, Russia or Ukraine. And Orban said something really interesting. He said, Russia, period. It's like, I'm paraphrasing, but Russia. Why? Because Russia has 150 million people and Ukraine has I don't know if it's 10 million or less. In other words, a huge difference in population. That is a very sobering comment. In other words, Russia and Ukraine are going to fight it out until there's no men left. If they fight it out, Russia will get what they want and stop, or they'll fight it until Ukraine runs out of men. And it's just a mindset in the West and in United States and in the year 2025, thank God, in a sense, by virtue of our peace and our prosperity, we don't think that way. So there's these moments. So what do I say for the last week? And if you don't have time to sit around and digest all this, or if you just enjoy my insights on it, then thank you. Hegseth telling the world Ukraine will not be joining NATO. Okay. Putin, tie that together with Putin's comments and with Tucker Carlson, where it's probably the most information we've received about Putin. And again, it doesn't mean we believe everything he said, but that's what he presented. And we have to read between the lines. I think when you look at Putin's message there, and he went through the whole history of Russia and Ukraine and the history of his relationship with the United States, that's what's clear. And that's consistent with what Hegseth is saying. That's not acceptable. Ukraine entering NATO is not acceptable. And that's the first thing you see Trump. So there's the line. That's been drawn. Now the other negotiations can happen. I believe the Biden administration, that's not what they would not make that promise. In fact, I think they actively said that Ukraine joining NATO was a reality. And couple that with Orban, which was a recent interview just this week. I think that we need to know how Putin thinks. We need to know what Russia's position is. There's two sides to every story, not to be cliche about it, but it just is. And then the relationship of the United States to Europe. Okay, this is really important. And Vance going over there and talking about AI, but he chooses to talk about freedom. Basically, the taste of the soup is freedom of speech. And he lectured them. I thought it was fantastic. It was strong. It was clear. It was articulate. He was a gentleman. It was like a Churchillian moment, but as an American. Vance is a star. Vance is fantastic. Of course, Europe is pushing back and they're insulted. But we see what's happening. And we saw what happened in Romania. The election not going the way Europe wants, so it's canceled out. We see pushback against the alternative for Germany, AfD, and Alice Weidel, and they're calling her far right. And if you look at it, her policies are similar to Trump's. So there's constant refrain of that they're Nazis or they're in the line of Hitler or they're far right. It's losing its weight. In fact, I saw a great video the other day, yesterday. I was a young student in Britain, I believe, and I guess it was like a debate class, and he spoke in a very eloquent way about how by calling these men fascist, by calling Trump fascist, you're actually just diluting the word fascist. Because you can't compare Hitler and Trump. It's so insulting to the 6 million Jews who lost their lives during the Holocaust. It's insulting to the millions of lives lost during World War II because of Hitler's aggression. Where do you see Trump with military aggression? And where do you see, to even say, where do you see him rounding up people and putting them in concentration camps and genocide? It's insane. And you need the fact that this young man, I believe he was a college student, I imagine, I didn't get the details. But again, it's a glimmer, and you say, yeah, there it is. But coming from him, it shined, we already know this, but it shined a different kind of light on it, because sometimes we need a young person to say the arguments. And you say, yeah, you shake your head in a different way. Yeah, okay. All right, so we're going to have real progress. That's my prediction on Ukraine. And I think that, like Viktor Orban of Hungary told Carlson Carlson said, do you think there could be a ceasefire and lasting peace within 6 months? And Orban said sooner, because he's a serious man. And then Orban had this quote, strong man makes peace, weak man makes war. Biden was a weak man. Trump is a strong man. Putin is a strong man. Xi is a strong man. Okay? You know who else is a strong man? Is Milei, President Milei, Javier Milei in Argentina. Okay, so We have the El Salvadorian president. We have a rising of true good leaders. And this is all in the, let's see, the overall atmosphere that we're watching. The same, what else is happening in this? While this is taking place, and Western Europe, France and Britain and France and Germany are insulted by Vance. We have Austria. We have a Syrian asylum seeker in Austria stab 5 people on the street and kill a 14-year-old. Okay. What else is going on? Pope Francis is in the hospital. We pray for him. He had double pneumonia. I think he's stable, and I think he might be improving. The last reports I saw, serious at that age. I think he's 88, double pneumonia. Of course, we pray for him. Of course, there was a lot of criticism of him last week about the immigration issue. And it doesn't change the criticism. And because it's not really just the Pope, it's a certain wing of the Catholic Church presenting this argument over and over again about how you treat migrants. And just to summarize on that, because I think it's important how it fits in. First of all, why call them migrants? Most of them are not migrants. Most of them are immigrants. In other words, they're migrant. They're not just coming here and leaving. They're coming here to stay. And so, because migrant kind of like paints this picture that they're coming to work and they're looking. No, they're coming to live here, to start a better life. Most of them are not seeking asylum, at least not asylum that's normally understood. Asylum, like your life is endangered for political reasons from the country you're in. Okay, these are people mostly seeking a better life, and I don't blame them. And there are also people who have crossed the border in a non-legal channel, which makes it illegal. So they're illegal immigrants, and that is the proper term. And for the Vatican and certain bishops to keep pushing this idea that what we're doing is immoral, I push back hard. And I can separate these two issues. I can separate completely. Now, because this Pope is sick, do I have to? No. God bless the Pope. He's the Pope. He's my Pope. I'm a Catholic. And I pray for his health. And I believe he's a holy man. In his way, the God has put him in the chair of St. Peter. I believe he's wrong on this immigration issue. And so why? Because he's missing. I just had breakfast with somebody this morning. I'll share it with you. He's a father as well. I'm a father. And fathers have this thing. And this man is a very, very good man, a very good father, very spiritual, religious, Catholic. And it's clear when you talk to fathers, they get it, especially if the father has a young girl, as a father toward protecting their daughter. And if you've lived in this country, and there are certain areas are more obvious than others, but when you walk down a street and you see people who are, they're clearly not simulating, they're not productive in the sense of they're sitting out in a vacant house and they're drinking alcohol during the day and they're staring at your daughter. It's a problem. That's threatening. And you don't know for sure if they're immigrants, illegal immigrants, but we know there's a pattern of people coming into this country. We also know that they're being subsidized by the federal government, more so than our own citizens. And that some of them have records, some of them have been charged and not leaving. So when you add all that up, and the role of the father, and yes, love is primary to your vocation. I have to love those in my care more than I love the stranger. It just is. And no pope and no bishop and no cardinal is going to convince me, because it's the truth. And when you're not a father, I hate to pull this card out, but it's just the truth. I don't know what it's like to have a celibate life. Yeah, I'm married. I haven't given myself the celibacy and become a priest. So I don't know what the pain and suffering of that is, the hardship. But they don't also know the hardship of having offspring. Again, especially as a father to a daughter, and the role of protecting her and protecting them and protecting your wife and protecting your sisters and your neighbor's kids. Protection. We are protectors. So when somebody tells you you can't you can't control your border, you can't lock your doors at night, it's a visceral and real and genuine and intellectually sound reaction. So, and when you see in Munich, was it Munich or somewhere in Germany, Berlin? It was in Germany when somebody drove a vehicle into people and killed a mother and a toddler. It was definitely in Germany, and it was definitely somebody drove a vehicle, and again, the mother and the toddler. And we see in Austria. So what are we tasting from this sauce? We see in Austria a Syrian asylum seeker stab to death a 14-year-old. We also about the hostage exchange in Gaza, and that mother and the two the babies, and they know they're dead for all this time. They couldn't tell them, and they're just bringing the bodies back now. And you have to negotiate to deliver the bodies of toddlers, of infant. So to put that all together, and immigration is an issue. Illegal immigration is an issue. Immigration in general is a beautiful thing if it's controlled. It's a wonderful exchange of people and ideas and cultures. Yes, pluralistic society, I get it. But if you look at it all, Putin's border, Germany has major problems because of the amount of illegal immigrants or migrants or refugees. And so does Italy and France. We see the problems France has. And look at Britain. It's a disaster. We have our problems at the border, southern border mainly, but Trump is dealing with that. 10,000 Mexican troops to the border. And Canada saying, okay, we're going to use 10,000 personnel to help with the border and spend billions of dollars to help control the border. And Trump talking about Greenland. Why? Strategic. Defense. And also resources. And Panama Canal. We find out that China is involved in running the canal. And then Rubio goes down there and he's out. So it's when you fly over, it's really the clarity is what's striking to me. The Monroe Doctrine, us, the United States protecting the Western Hemisphere, is coming into play by getting China out of Panama, dealing with our border with Mexico and the drug cartels, and declaring the cartels terrorist organizations allows Trump to send the U.S. military. And now there's reports that we're going to help train some of the Mexican soldiers to deal with the cartel, and drones flying over. By the way, the Mexican president is complaining about Trump renaming, which it's now renamed, the Gulf of America. Gulf of Mexico is now the Gulf of America, and it's changed in Apple Maps and Google Maps. And she's busy complaining about that. I talked about this yesterday on X. I mean, like, she has nothing else to do. I mean, the Mexico is in such a bad shape that everybody's trying to leave. So I think you need to focus on Mexico. Second, I think you need to focus on those cartels. And I think third, you got to confiscate tons of drugs that are coming into our country and killing our young people. So I'm not going to waste my time worrying about her talking about the Gulf of Mexico. But what Trump's doing is he's so good. He's so good at distracting in a positive sense. He's constantly on the offense. So while they're talking about that, the border is being secured. I think the border crossings are down. It was down from 1,000 a day to 70 or something like that. I mean, it's border getaways. And Canada, well, threatened tariffs, and boom. He's already talked to Denmark controls Greenland. He's been on the phone with Prime Minister of Denmark. So that's how it's happening in our Western Hemisphere. And he sends Rubio, Hegseth, and Vance over to Europe. So I think you're going to see major progress in Ukraine. And Ukraine is not going to enter NATO. I think you're going to see an electoral shift in Europe that's going to promote freedom. Because Europe knows that in order to compete with us in a business sense, and Trump is inviting businesses to come over to the United States. So they need to, you can't you can't have people restricted on social media. Of course, flat out threaten violence, hate, okay. But you need to have people expressing themselves politically, and an insult. Yes, it may not be a nice thing to be insulted online, but we cannot make this illegal. We have to allow society to function. That if somebody's using that kind of language, society itself can alienate them just by saying, I don't want to hang out with that guy. I'm not going to associate with that person. I'm not going to follow that person. But you can't criminalize insults. And that connects to this little issue of AP, the Associated Press, not being in the press room, the White House press room. It's saying, people say, oh, Trump and Musk and Vance, they're all for free speech. But meanwhile, they get rid of the. Listen, man, that is completely losing, not being. You don't have a constitutional right to be in the press room of the White House. You have a unalienable right to speak. Stopping somebody from speaking is one in one way is a completely different realm. Or arresting people, Germans arresting people for social media comments. That's completely that's removing a right to speak. This is not receiving a seat in a room during a press conference. It's not in the Constitution that the AP needs to be in the press office, the briefing room. So they don't. This is all. The Democrats don't know what to do. They don't know how to fight this because they have dug themselves so deep into a. They don't believe in democracy. They just don't. They believe in democracy if their candidate wins. Okay? They don't believe in free speech. They only believe in speech if it's consistent with what they believe. We see in Brooklyn last night, you have Palestinian protesters fighting with Orthodox Jews. That's where we stand. So that's the view. The takeaway, last time. Free speech is the answer. 2, Ukraine will not be joining NATO. There will be peace. And 3, Trump is going to continue to develop this hemispherical stance where we can have an ocean separating us. And that's our ultimate protection because it still matters. And in the meanwhile, Iran is in the process of being isolated. Because as we negotiate with Russia, just the act of negotiating with them basically sets the stage where Russia needs to automatically distance itself from Iran. They can't be actively influencing Iran to interfere with Israel while they're negotiating with us. So just by going on this approach of talking, it's already has to distance Iran from Russia a little bit. And of course, by dealing with China and the tariff issue, they continue to make a little distance between China and Iran. And as Iran is isolated, the sanctions are more effective, and they're going to have to concede that we will not accept a nuclear bomb. So that's my overview. All right, send in some comments and emails, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening. Bye.